One of the Holy Name of Jesus is its full title, but in fact, everybody just knows it as the Holy Name. On Oxford Road, opposite the Student Union in Manchester, and the other one's the Edgar Woods Centre. Oh dear. Anyway, meanwhile, back at the Holy Name. It was designed by Joseph A. Hansom, who apparently also designed the Hansom carriage, or his name comes out from him. And it was built between 1869 and 1871. And it's a Roman Catholic church. I took this image from Google Maps. You know, you can go onto Google Maps and then take photos of the up-to-date versions of it. And this is when, apparently, it's very much a Jesuit church. And the Jesuits are a very interesting branch of Catholicism, which I'll come on to. But they eventually left it, but they returned in 2012 and are now there. Because the first Bishop of Salford, the Roman Catholic Bishop of Salford, invited the Jesuits to make a home in this building. At the time, it was a middle-class suburb. And you know why the Catholics don't have a Bishop of Manchester? They have a Bishop of Salford. Why is that?
I don't know.
Why would they have it? Well, because if the Church of England had taken Manchester, and you're not allowed to have the same name, so they got Salford instead. But it's the same area, it's a Manchester Salford area. It looks good. And I've always noticed it. It's always been a prominent feature of Oxford Road. Very pleasant looking church. But going back a bit, and this relates to the Holy Name, this is the hidden gem. Has anybody ever been there or noticed it?
Yeah, I have. It's
yes,
a nice
I
place.
have. Yes, it's hidden, very hidden away.
It is at the back of Market Street, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. You can just cut through from Albert Square, you know, if it's busy and you just want a quiet moment, you can just cut through.
And it's very nice, and it is very quiet, and it's hidden away. But this was the parish church, St. Mary's Catholic Church, which dates back to 1794. But it was rebuilt in 1848 after the second, after it had opened originally in 1794. It collapsed in 1835 after it had been re-roofed by some dodgy builders.
Oh dear.
We all know about that.
Yes.
The new church was designed by Matthew Ellison Hadfield, but Augustus Pugin was involved as well. And it's a blend of Norman, Gothic and Byzantine detail. Pugin himself said that the building showed, and this is a really strange comment, shows to what depth of error even good men fall when they go whoring after strange styles. But I think it looks quite nice myself. I think it was a bit,
I think it is.
bit rough. It's maybe a pastiche, but it looks pretty good to me. And, old age always does it a favour, doesn't it? You always see it. Oh, something I haven't noticed is that there's a little statue of Mary, isn't there, on the first floor as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It is St. Mary's. It's dedicated to Mary. So the Jesuit connection. Oh, and of course, by the way, the one before was the Catholic Church when there were a huge number of deaths from cholera, and I think eight different priests all died from typhoid, I think, during that period as well. Anyway, the Jesuit connection. Now that outfit on the left, and the guy on the left is Father Bernard Vaughan, and there's also Bernard Vaughan's on the right, and Cardinal Herbert Vaughan is on the left. And I'm always very familiar with that outfit because the head of the school I was at was a Monsignor, and he had one of those great big sort of purple cummerbunds, which I thought were very impressive.
They look very much alike, don't they?
Well, that's because they're brothers.
Yes, they are alike.
Now,
yes,
they came from an old recusant Catholic family. And I think I've talked about recusant before, but it's another word I really like. And what does it mean? It basically, it's those who between the period of 1570 to 1791, when these various acts were repealed, or mostly repealed, who refused to attend Church of England services. It was a statutory offence not to attend a service. And it comes from recusare, meaning to reject, and from causa, meaning cause or reason, reasons to reject, recusant. And there were 1558 recusancy acts were passed by Elizabeth I. They're only repealed in 1888, but they become a bit sort of, were just on the statute rather than anybody using them for quite a long time. And it meant you could get fines, your property could be confiscated, you could be imprisoned, and in extreme, especially if you were a priest coming along, you could be killed, you could be executed. And that, of course, led to the 40 English martyrs, which, going to a Catholic school, was what I learned all about in history, one of the things I learned about in history. And where were most of the recusants based? Whereabouts in England? Lancashire and Cumberland. 20% were recusants in those areas during this period. Very, very few, relatively speaking, elsewhere. So it's always been a big recusant area. And these two came from the Vaughans, who were a well-known recusant family in Herefordshire. So they had 5 daughters, all of whom became nuns, and 6 of the 8 sons received holy orders and became priests. So Bernard Vaughan, the guy who took on the holy name, his brother became Bishop of Salford, which is a bit confusing because they were both in Manchester at the same time. It's very easy to get them confused. And later Archbishop of Westminster, a cardinal and primate of the whole of England and Wales. And he also, whilst he was Bishop of Salford, established my school, St. Bede's. And the bishops lived in the house, which is a rather eerie looking house next to the St. Bede's on Alexandra Road in Whalley Range. I don't know if anybody knows it, but I do, obviously, because I went to school there. And he established St. Bede's to prepare the sons of Manchester Catholics for a life in business and the professions. There you go. Thought to just throw that in. It was only really by 1829 that Catholics got full emancipation, effective emancipation, even though there was still some acts on the books. So so it's Father Bernard Vaughan I'm particularly interested here. Now, this is a quote from, it's a really bizarre one, this. Apparently he was a brilliant orator. And this is a strange clip from the New York Times. They used to go on tours of America, the Jesuits. They used to go, they're quite hopping across the Atlantic quite a lot because Jesuits became big in the States. Father Bernard Vaughan is a son of blah, 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 blah. He was one of 14 children. His preaching startled London, and the very subjects of his strictures flocked to hear him. It seems a bit masochistic. This story is told of the sensation he caused. The stage of a London theatre was held by a danseuse who captivated one night a brilliant audience, drawn there by the presence of the king. The king was greatly impressed with the woman's skill and grace. He sent for her after the performance and asked her to name something he might give her to show his appreciation. The dancer curtsied low and said, "Your Majesty, the head of Father Vaughan on a dish." It's a strange story, that one, isn't it? It's a strange story.
It's Salome, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's this kind of stories I like about older buildings. It leads you on to all sorts of, that Bernard Vaughan, who was the first priest to look after it. And of course, the Catholics were involved in the 1605 gunpowder plot, which people might be, or a few might be celebrating on Bonfire Night next month. So they had their Jesuits had a formidable record. And whenever they came to our school, we were always very wary of them because they were very clever and would take anybody down if they could, including the boys.
What do you mean by take anybody down?
Well, for example, I remember one Polish Jesuit we had a retreat. I don't know if you want to know what a retreat is. It's not something that an army does necessarily. It was a period of reflection at the school where you're not allowed to speak, and you've got to read holy texts and the various talks by Jesuits. And in one, I remember, and we were about what, 11 or 12, and this priest boomed out in an East, I think he was Polish, might have been German. He talked about sex, which, you know, obviously we were interested in, but he said, and this is a phrase because he repeated it time after time after time, and I imagine every boy who was there, like me, has remembered it ever since. Sex blinds, binds, deadens, destroys. Can you believe that? No. Anyway, meanwhile, back at his holy name, apparently he was because he was such a good debater. He debated with the Bishop of Manchester, James Warhouse, over rival claims of the Catholic Church in England and Wales and the Church of England to be the Catholic Church and successor of St. Augustine. He's thought to have won it hands down. I don't know how they worked that out. But in their jubilation, the young men of Holy Name pulled his carriage from the city centre all the way to the church. Well, again, I don't know. I like the image of that. And, you know, along Oxford Road, wasn't like it was today. Now, this is the tower as it was originally designed by Hansom, he of Hansom carriage frame. It would have been half as high again as the present tower, but they couldn't because there were poor ground conditions under the foundations. The original building, therefore, looked much less impressive than it does today because they must have found some way around that particular problem. And that's how it was in 1928, when the tower, you can see, was added as a memorial to Father Bernard Vaughan. And I'm always very keen of famous Bernards, so this is another one to add to my list. It was 185 feet high and contained a chime of 15 bells by Gillet and Johnson. And it says of the bells today, a new mechanism was installed in 1995 and plays automatically the Angelus and some 20 hymn tunes, as well as bell ringing before Mass, etc. There is also a keyboard for manual operation. Pevner described the holy, I'm sure some of you have heard of Nicholas Pevner, who did a very famous review of all, and the people who worked for him, of all what he thought were the great buildings in England. And he said on this one, the holy name is of the very highest quality and of an originality nowhere demonstrative. Don't know what that means. Hansom never again did so marvelous a church. There's another back view of it, which I've never really seen it from that angle before. It looks very, very different.
It does.
And there's the one of the altar, which again looks very nice. For any of you who went on the tour of St. Augustine's, the guy who did that for us, he does tours of Holy Name as well. Maybe we should arrange one for that someday. But hey ho, there are lots of things we could do. We might do, or we might not. And this is the front of it again. So it does. I think it looks quite impressive. It's quite nice. Anyway, we got the restoration of the Jesuits eventually. They've been suppressed in 1773, but by 1803, a group of former English and Welsh Jesuits gained permission to join the White Russian Jesuits. Well, what were they doing that? I don't know about that. And to reform an English province. They call the various areas that they have provinces. So they renewed their vows at Stonyhurst under Marmaduke Stone as first provincial of the restored English province. So the Act of Catholic Emancipation in 1829, which wasn't total, it forbade Jesuits and others to recruit in England and Wales, hoping eventually it would become extinct. But the province actually flourished in the 19th century. By 1953, there were over 900 Jesuits in the province, and here's, I don't know, must have been some of the hierarchy together with their pupils or whatever supporters. I'm not sure where it comes from. But this is an interesting one. And this is a link with the Smiths, the group. And just listen to this, see if you can hear it.
I was minding my business, lifting some black dogs on the roof of a holy church. It was worthwhile living a laughable life, setting my eyes on blistering skies of a church is not strange.
Yes. So a very strange link there to obviously Morrissey, who was brought up in Manchester, actually born in Stretford, must have known this. I don't know whether it sounds like he was in a Catholic family, so he would have known of the holy name. And so that's his song, Vicar in a Tutu, based on the Holy Name Church, which is one of those links which just is too good to ignore, isn't it, really? And that's one from their current website, which shows a lovely picture of the altar, I think, there. Shows how nice it is. Right. So quickly moving on. How many minutes have we got left? Anybody? You see? I can't see them.
8.
8. Okay. This is the Edgar Wood Centre. Has anybody ever been there or passed it or heard of it?
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's the most recent building to have been given Grade 1 status. And it was designed by the architect Edgar Wood for the Christian Scientist's first church in Britain. It began in 1903 and finished later in 1905. As you can see, it's a very distinctive sorts of arts and crafts type of building. That's the gateway. So it's seen as being in an expressionistic style with Art Nouveau details and later used as offices. This is the gateway, which is only Grade 2 listed, the gateway. In Art Nouveau style, it's also red brick, some sandstone and a slate roof.
I think that's gorgeous.
It's not bad, is it? It's not bad. It's very nice.
Really nice.
I really liked it. You know, it's one of those that you go past and you think, that's probably got an interesting story to it. And this is Edgar Wood. He was a bit of an eccentric and flamboyant, had a flamboyant taste in dress. He wore a voluminous black cloak lined with red silk, a broad-brimmed hat, and carried a silver-handled cane. And he had a dachshund, called Lily Lies Low. Or I was thinking maybe one of us was like that in our youth and is just keeping it quiet. But he wasn't just a kind of dandy, but he had great beliefs, determination, and a lot of energy. He was very big in Germany, very popular architect in Germany. Most of his work was in nearby towns. There's a lot in Rochdale, Oldham, and Middleton, of which he was a native, and in outlying districts such as Bramhall and Hale. Now, this is Royd House in Hale. You can see the similarity there, can't you? And he'd taken to using reinforced concrete. Reinforced concrete meant that you didn't have to have pitched roofs. Now, I always think pitched roofs and Manchester don't mix. Sorry, flat roofs and Manchester don't go together well. And if anybody's noticed those houses in Wythenshawe that you passed by on the park, there was a whole series of houses there that had flat roofs, and nearly all of them since then have had adaptations to give them leaning roofs, pitched roofs, because rain eventually causes problems with a flat roof. And anybody who knows that, even if it's of a small roof over a bay window or something like that, they're always problematic, aren't they, if you've got them flat? Anyway, this house sits on Hale Road in Hale, not far from the town centre, built in 1914. And it's got the same freedom of shape and affords it's also, interestingly, a Grade 1 building. Here are some of his others. This is an arts and crafts style. It's the only photo I could get of it. I don't think it is on a bend like that, but they did that to make it look more artistic, I think. It's based on, it says, extended lines and sensuous curves.
Oh, okay.
It was another kind of arts and crafts style one. And he was basically, the arts and crafts approach was to restore or revive traditional building techniques to create beautiful yet practical houses, stressed on an honest craftsmanship, handmade quality, and the importance of art in everyday life. This was the, for over 60 years, it was kept in immaculate shape. Then overnight, the church congregation left, and then it became an office building, and a lot of the interior stuff, such as this, was stripped out. And you can see there it being used just as an office. And that was just a little bit background to the Church of Christ Scientist, started by Mary Baker Eddy. And it seems to me a very unusual grouping, but it's still going, isn't it? It's still going one way or another. Fortunately, Manchester Corporation took on the building, which was in danger of just falling into wreck and ruin. And they've managed to save a lot of it and restore it, from which I think you just got to give them praise for that.
Bernard, I have to tell you that I hope you don't mind me saying, but the Jesuits put fear into me. As a 9-year-old, I was sent, because of the epilepsy, to Quor Abbey on the Isle of Wight for this so-called retreat, to be exorcised to remove the effects of...
Oh no.
Oh, that's
a 9-year-old dragged out of the hospital I was in, sent there with one priest as accompaniment. My parents weren't allowed to be there. Spent 2 weeks surrounded by these Jesuit monks chanting most of the time. And every time I had a fit, I was put in a little room with a stone floor and not allowed to clean myself. It was
me.
Yeah, it was, and that
that's awful.
Oh, it really is appalling.
Evil people.
Absolutely.
all in the word of God.
Haven't got a flat roof.
Bye, everybody. We'll be being cut off in a second.
Yeah, have a good day with the birthday, Bernard.
Yeah. Keep bouncing. Keep bouncing.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Lovely to see you, Sandy.
Bye. Bye.